Mail-order bride arrived broken with a baby in her arms. The cowboy whispered, "You're safe with me now." A true story. There is a kind of tired that sleep cannot fix. It is the tired that settles into a person after too many months of being afraid, after too many nights of lying still and listening for footsteps, after too many mornings of looking in the mirror and not quite recognizing the woman looking back. Nadia knew that kind of tired very well. She was 31 years old when she stepped off the train in a small Texas town she had only ever seen in a photograph. She was carrying a canvas bag in one hand and her baby daughter in the other arm. The baby's name was Zora. She was 4 months old and she was sleeping, which was good because Nadia did not have the energy to comfort anyone that afternoon. She was using everything she had just to keep herself standing. Her left cheekbone still carried the last traces of a bruise, a faint greenish-yellow shadow that even strangers could see if the light hit her face a certain way. She had not been able to cover it completely. She had tried. She had pressed a powder compact against her skin that morning in the train bathroom, with the baby balanced on her hip and the sink running cold water, and she had looked at herself in that tiny cracked mirror and thought, "It is still there. You can still see it." She tucked the compact back into her bag and told herself it did not matter. What mattered was getting off the train. What mattered was finding the man who was supposed to meet her. What mattered was that she had come this far, all the way from a village outside Kyiv, all the way across an ocean and half a continent, and she was not going to fall apart on a train platform in Texas. She stepped onto the platform and looked around. The afternoon heat hit her like a wall. It was August, and the Texas sun was brutal and honest. No shade, no apology, just heat pressing down on everything. The platform was mostly empty. A few people moved past her with their luggage, heading for cars and trucks parked along the road. She stood still and looked for a face she had only seen in one photograph. He was leaning against the wall near the station door. Tall, lean, wearing a faded blue shirt and a wide-brimmed hat. His arms were crossed, his face was weathered the way faces get when a person spends most of their life outdoors. Not old exactly, but marked by sun and wind and time. He was looking at the train, scanning the passengers, and she could see the moment his eyes found her. He went still. Not in the way a person freezes when they are surprised, in the way a person goes still when they see something that requires careful attention. He pushed off the wall. He walked toward her slowly, unhurried, the way you approach something that might bolt if you move too fast. He stopped about 2 paces away, far enough that she could feel the distance, that she could feel he had put it there on purpose. He took his hat off. He held it in both hands. He looked at her face, at the bruise, at the baby, at the way she was standing with her shoulders pulled in and her weight shifted back. And something moved through his eyes that she did not expect. It was not pity. It was not the awkward look of a man realizing he has made a mistake. It was something quieter than that, something that looked almost like recognition. And then he said, low enough that only she could hear it, "You're safe with me now." He did not say it like a line he had practiced. He said it the way a person says something true, plain and direct, with no decoration around it. Nadia looked at him for a long moment. She had been lied to before by men who said kind things. She had learned, the hard way, that kind words at the beginning meant nothing. She had learned to watch what a person did, not what they said. But something about the way he said it made her breath slow down. Not because she believed him yet, but because, for the first time in a very long time, someone had said those words to her at all. To understand how Nadia ended up on that platform, you have to go back a little, not all the way back, not to her childhood, not to the village she grew up in, not to the father who ran that household like a small kingdom with very strict rules. You just have to go back about 5 years. She was 26 when she married the man she will only ever call her first husband in this story. His name does not deserve to be here. He was charming in the beginning. Most of them are. He was from a neighboring town, he had a good job, his family was well respected, and he wrote her letters before they were married that made her feel like someone had finally seen her clearly and liked what they saw. She thought she was lucky. Her mother thought she was lucky. Everyone thought she was lucky. The luck ran out about 3 months in. She will not tell you everything that happened in those 5 years, and this story will not tell you either. Some things do not need to be described in detail to be understood. What you need to know is that she tried everything a person tries when they are stuck in a situation they cannot believe is real. She tried being better. She tried being quieter. She tried not arguing, not asking, not wanting anything out loud. She tried pretending it was not happening. She tried telling herself it would get better, that he would change, that the good days would start to outnumber the bad. They never did. When she found out she was pregnant, she thought for about 2 weeks that maybe this would change things. A baby, she told herself. A baby changes people. Sometimes that is true. For her, it was not. What the pregnancy changed was the calculation she had been running in her head every day. The calculation about whether it was worth it to stay, whether leaving was possible, whether she had anywhere to go. A baby shifted that calculation completely. She could take her own chances. She could not take her child's. She started making a plan. It took a long time. She had to be careful. She had to be patient in a way that did not come naturally to her. She was, under all the quietness that had been pressed into her over the years, a woman with opinions and fire and a stubbornness that she had learned to hide. She saved money in small amounts, tucked away in places she knew would not be searched. She kept her face smooth and her voice even, and she waited. She had heard about the correspondence agency from a woman she met at the market one afternoon, a woman whose cousin had gone to America that way, had written back, had said she was fine. Better than fine. Nadia sent a letter. The agency wrote back. There were forms. There were photographs. There were letters going back and forth across an ocean to a man she had never met, a rancher in Texas named Colt Harlan. His letters were not romantic. She will tell you that freely. He did not write things designed to sweep her off her feet. He wrote plainly, about the ranch, about the work, about the fact that his wife had died a few years back, and his grown daughter had told him he ought to try this because she worried about him rattling around that big house alone. He said he was not sure what he was looking for, but he thought having someone to share the days with seemed like a reasonable thing to want. He said he would treat her with respect and give her a real home and not make her feel like she owed him anything beyond showing up honestly. It was that last part that made her decide. Not the ranch, not the money, though she would be lying if she said the stability meant nothing. It was that sentence, not make her feel like she owed him anything beyond showing up honestly. She had spent 5 years in a house where she owed everything for the crime of existing. The idea of owing nothing except honesty sounded to her like the most extraordinary thing in the world. She left on a Tuesday morning in February. She waited until he had gone to work. She had Zora bundled against her chest. Zora was 6 weeks old, small and warm, and unaware of anything except hunger and sleep. Nadia walked out of the house with her canvas bag and did not look back. She did not look back once. It took her 3 months to get the paperwork sorted, to get the agency's approval, to get through the complicated and exhausting process of getting from where she was to where she was going. 3 months of staying in places that were not her home, of depending on the kindness of people who owed her nothing, of keeping Zora fed and warm and as calm as a baby can be kept when her mother's hands are never quite steady. And then she was on a train, crossing Texas, watching the landscape outside the window go flat and golden and wide. And Zora was sleeping, and Nadia was so tired she could barely sit upright, and somewhere ahead of her was a man she had never met, who had written her 12 letters and sent her 1 photograph and promised her, in plain, steady words, that he would give her a real home. She held on to that word like something solid. Home. Colt Harlan was not a man who talked much about himself, so this part of the story will be short, which is how he would want it. He was 43 years old. He had grown up on Dust Haven Ranch, which had been his grandfather's land, and then his father's, and now his. He had spent his whole life on that land, learning it the way you learn a person, slowly, through all the seasons, through the dry years and the good years, through everything it threw at you. He loved it the way ranchers love land, not romantically, but practically, The way you love something that requires everything you have and gives back in proportion. He had been married to a woman named Elaine for 19 years. She had been funny and sharp-tongued and better with numbers than he ever was, and she had laughed at things he did not expect to be funny, and she had made the house feel like a place worth coming home to. She died of cancer 6 years before this story starts. She was 40 years old. It was not fair, and Colt knew it was not fair, and he had stopped expecting fairness from the world long before that, and it still had not prepared him. After Elaine died, he kept going. That is the only way to say it. He kept getting up in the morning, kept feeding the cattle, kept fixing what broke, kept paying what was owed. His daughter May had been 17 when her mother died, and she had needed him to keep going, and so he did. And then May went to college and the house got very quiet, and he kept going still, because stopping was not in him. May had pushed him toward the correspondence agency with the particular stubbornness of a child who loves their parent and cannot stand watching them go gray and silent. She had sat across from him at the kitchen table one evening and said, "Dad, I know you are going to say you're fine. I also know that fine is not the same as okay, and okay is not the same as good, and I would really like you to aim for good before you're too old to enjoy it." He had looked at her for a long time. Then he had said, "You sound like your mother." "I know," May said. "That's why you should listen to me." He had filled out the forms mostly to quiet her. He had written the letters because once he started, he found he could not stop. There was something about writing to a person he had never met, someone who had no history with him, no expectations of who he was supposed to be, that made it easier to be honest. He told her things in those letters he had not said out loud in years. He told her about Elaine. He told her that he was not easy to know. He told her that the ranch was hard work, and the town was small, and the winters were lonely, in a way that summer never quite fixed. He sent one photograph, a recent one, not a flattering one. May had fussed at him to find a better one. He had said that if she came all this way and was disappointed by his actual face, it was better for everyone to know that up front. When Nadia wrote back, her letters were careful, not cold, just careful. She was measuring something, he realized. She was reading him the way you read a contract before you sign it, looking for the fine print. He respected that. He wrote back even more plainly. He wanted there to be no fine print. He had not expected her to actually come, and then she did. And then he was standing on a train platform in the August heat, watching a woman walk toward him with a baby in her arms and a bruise on her face, and everything he thought he knew about what this was going to be shifted into something else entirely. Not on a person, on animals, on cattle that had been through something bad. There is a particular way of moving that develops when a creature has spent a long time being afraid. The shoulders come in, the weight shifts back, ready. The eyes watch everything. He recognized it immediately, and something in his chest went hot and quiet. He walked up to her slowly. He gave her plenty of space. He took his hat off because it was the right thing to do, the decent thing, and because he did not want to tower over her with the brim adding to his height. And then he said the only thing he could think to say that was both true and useful in that moment. He told her she was safe. He meant it the way he meant everything, without decoration, without drama, as a statement of what he intended to do. He did not know this woman. He did not know her story. He did not know what had put that bruise there or how long she had been carrying whatever weight she was carrying. But he knew that she had come a very long way on nothing but a promise, and the least he could do was make good on it. May was waiting at the truck. She had insisted on coming, and Colt had not fought her on it, which was wise, because May fighting you about something was considerably more exhausting than just letting her come. She was 19, and she had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, and she greeted Nadia the way she greeted everyone, warmly, directly, with no pretense and no hesitation. "Hi," she said. "I'm May. I'm the one who basically made my dad do this, so if anything is weird or awkward, blame me. Can I hold the baby? What's her name?" Nadia blinked. "Zora," she said. "Zora," May repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "That's a beautiful name. Hi, Zora. She was already holding out her hands with complete confidence that she would be handed the baby, and Nadia, slightly stunned by the velocity of the girl's warmth, handed her over. Colt picked up the canvas bag without being asked. He put it in the truck. He opened the passenger door and held it open, and Nadia got in, and he closed it gently, and that was that. No ceremony, no speech, just a man who saw what needed doing and did it. The drive to Dusthaven took about 40 minutes. May talked most of the way, about the town, about the ranch, about which neighbors were worth knowing, and which ones minded their own business, and which ones could not leave anyone else's alone. Nadia listened and nodded, and looked out the window at a landscape she had never seen anything like. Flat and golden and enormous. The sky here was bigger than any sky she had grown up under. It went in every direction at once, and there were no hills to stop it, and it was the strangest and most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Dusthaven came into view at the end of a long, unpaved drive. It was not a grand place, it was a working ranch, which meant everything on it was built to be useful rather than pretty. But there was a rightness to it, a solidness, a sense that it had been standing a long time and intended to keep standing. The house was 2 stories, painted white a long time ago, with a wraparound porch that had seen a lot of sitting. There were barns and outbuildings and fencing that stretched off in every direction. There were cattle moving slowly in the distance like a slow brown river. Nadia got out of the truck and stood in the drive and looked at it. Colt came to stand beside her, not close, just near. "It's a lot of work," he said, "but it's a good place." "Yes," she said, "I can see that it is." He showed her the house. May narrated, because May narrated everything. The kitchen, which was large and practical and smelled like coffee. The living room, which had a stone fireplace and a sofa that had been broken in over many years and was now exactly the right kind of comfortable. The back porch, which faced west and caught the evening light in a way that he said she would come to appreciate once she had seen a Texas sunset. He showed her the room he had prepared for her. It was the largest room in the house, and she realized that it must have been the room he had been using. There were still faint marks on the wall where pictures had hung, and the closet was empty in a way that meant recently emptied. He had moved out of his own room to give her the best one. He said nothing about this. He just showed her the room and asked if it would work. She said it would work. She did not say what she was thinking, which was, who does this? Who moves out of their own room for a stranger? She filed it away. She filed everything away in those first days. She was building a picture of him from small pieces, the way you build a picture of anything you do not yet understand. The first week was quiet. Colt was up before sunrise every morning. She heard him moving through the house, quiet footsteps, the soft sound of the back door, the distant noise of the barn coming to life. He did not wake her. He did not expect her downstairs at any particular time. He left coffee made on the stove, and that was all. She appreciated the coffee more than she knew how to say in English. Her English was functional. She could make herself understood. She could follow most of what was said to her, but it broke down under pressure. Under stress, or tiredness, or emotion, the words scattered, and she was left reaching for them in the wrong language, which was deeply frustrating for a woman who had always been good with words in her own tongue. She apologized for it constantly in those first days, which was a habit left over from a life where imperfection was punishable. Every time she apologized, Colt shook his head slightly, just once, a small firm movement, as if to say, "Stop, don't." He did not say it out loud for the first few days, and then one morning she apologized for mispronouncing something, and he set down his coffee cup and said, quietly, "There is nothing to apologize for. You're talking in your second language. That's harder than anything I do all day." She looked at him. She stopped apologizing. May came out to the ranch several times that first week, even though she was supposed to be getting ready to go back for her second year of college. She brought things, a children's book she said was good for babies even when they were too young to understand it, a pie she had baked herself, a list of names and phone numbers of people in town she thought Nadia ought to know. She also brought on her second visit a small plastic radio, which she put on the kitchen counter and set to a country music station saying that background noise made a strange house feel less strange. She was right about that, it did. Nadia started to understand, in those early days, the shape of the life she had arrived into. Colt worked from before sunrise until after sunset, every day except Sunday, which he spent doing lighter work, fixing things, checking fences, doing the kind of maintenance that did not require a full crew. He ate his meals without ceremony. He was not unfriendly, but he was not chatty either. He moved through the house and the ranch with the quiet efficiency of a man who had been responsible for this place for a very long time. She noticed that he always said good morning to her, that he always waited to see if she needed anything before he walked out the door, that when she was struggling to find a word, he never finished the sentence for her. He just waited, patient as a fence post, for her to find it herself. These were small things. She knew they were small things. But she had come from a place where small things were weapons, and so now small things were the first evidence of who a person really was. She was paying very close attention. One morning, about 10 days after her arrival, she came downstairs after feeding Zora and found the kitchen empty. The coffee was made. She poured herself a cup and went looking for Colt to ask about something, the washing machine, which had a setting she could not make sense of, and she found him in the living room. He was sitting in the big armchair by the window, still in his work clothes, hat still on his head, and Zora was on his palm. Not in the crook of his arm the way people usually hold babies. On his palm. One broad, calloused hand supporting her back and head, Zora sitting upright in his hand like she was perched on a shelf, looking up at him with the intense, unblinking seriousness she brought to most things. And he was talking to her. Quietly, so Nadia could not quite make out all of it from the doorway. She heard something about the cattle, something about the price of hay this year, something about the water table. All delivered with complete earnestness, as if Zora's opinion on the situation was relevant and expected. Zora's tiny face was focused. Her arms were moving in that random, unreliable way of 4-month-olds, and one hand kept reaching up in the direction of his jaw. Nadia stood in the doorway, and she did not move. She had spent 4 months being the only person in the world who held her daughter with that kind of care. The only person who had looked at Zora like she was important, like she mattered, like her presence in the world was a good and significant thing. She had been carrying that responsibility by herself, through the leaving, through the journey, through all the uncertain weeks before she arrived here, and it had been heavy in the way that only solitary things are heavy. And now here was this large, weathered, mostly silent man, sitting in his armchair at 6 in the morning explaining hay prices to her daughter like it was the most natural thing in the world. She had to press her hand flat against the doorframe to stay standing, not because she was weak, but because something that had been held very tight in her chest was, all at once, not quite so tight. She did not go in. She went back to the kitchen and drank her coffee and looked out the window at the wide, flat Texas morning, and she let herself feel something she had not felt in years. She was not sure what to call it. Maybe relief. Maybe the beginning of something she did not have a word for yet. 3 weeks after she arrived, a nightmare woke her up. This was not unusual. The nightmares had been coming for years. But this one was loud. Loud enough that she woke up already in the hallway, already moving, before she was fully conscious of being awake. Zora had heard her and was crying in the next room, and Nadia was trying to get to her, and she turned the corner in the dark and nearly walked straight into Colt. She flinched back so hard her shoulder hit the wall. The flinch happened before she could stop it. It was not a choice. It was what years of living with a certain kind of man had built into her body without asking her permission. She hated it. She hated that it still happened, hated what it said, hated that she could not make herself stop it even when she knew, even in that moment, that she was being irrational, that there was no threat here. But her body did not know that yet. Her body was still catching up. Colt stopped the instant she flinched. He took 2 steps back. He lifted both hands, not raised high, not dramatic, just up and open where she could see them in the dark. And he kept his voice low and steady, the voice he probably used with spooked animals, and he said, "It's just me. You're at Dust Haven. It's 3 in the morning. No one's here but us. He did not move toward her. Zora was still crying. Nadia got her feet under her and went to get the baby. When she came back into the hallway with Zora against her shoulder, Colt was still there, still at a distance, still not moving any closer, one hand now resting against the wall, as if to show her he was not going anywhere, but also not coming any closer. "Do you need anything?" he asked. "Water, more blankets, anything." She shook her head. He nodded. He stayed there, quiet, in the dark hallway, while she settled Zora back down. When she came back out, he was still there. Not hovering, not pressuring, just present, in the way that a solid wall is present, something you can lean against if you need to. "The nightmares," she said, because she felt she owed him some explanation. "They come sometimes." "I know," he said. Just that. Not, "That must be hard." Not, "I'm sorry." Just, "I know." Two words that somehow contained everything she needed to hear, which was that he had already understood, that she did not need to explain, that she was not surprising him, or alarming him, or making his life difficult. She went back to her room. She lay down with Zora on her chest, the baby's warm weight steadying her breathing. She looked at the ceiling. She thought, "This is a good man." She had thought that before, about the wrong person. So she did not let herself get carried away, but she thought it, carefully, like testing weight on ice, and the ice held. Callan's Creek was a small town, the kind of small where everyone knows everything, which is a comfort if you are one of them, and a complication if you are not. Nadia was very much not one of them, and she knew it would take time, and she was prepared for that. What she was not entirely prepared for was the variety of ways people had of making a newcomer feel their newness. There were the genuinely warm ones, people who came up to her in the general store, or the pharmacy, or the small diner on the main street, and introduced themselves, and asked about Zora, and made ordinary conversation without any edge to it. These people she liked immediately. There were the politely curious ones, people who wanted to know everything but had the manners to be indirect about it. She could handle these too. She had grown up among people who were indirect. And then there were the ones who made her feel, in small and deniable ways, that she was being assessed and found possibly lacking, a certain kind of smile that was not quite warm, a question phrased with just enough of an edge that it could be defended as innocence if you called it out. Little things. She was familiar with little things. She let them go. The person who changed the social situation was a woman named Dottie, who ran the post office and appeared to run most other things in town by sheer force of personality. Dottie was in her 60s, wide and loud, and entirely without pretense, and she had taken one look at Nadia, asked several direct questions, and received direct answers, and declared herself a friend. This happened on a Tuesday in Nadia's 4th week in town, and by Wednesday, several people who had been sitting on the fence about her had apparently received a communication, not written, just understood, the way things are understood in small towns, that Dottie had made up her mind, and that Dottie's mind was not going to be changed, and that people who gave Nadia trouble would have to answer for it to Dottie, which was not a prospect anyone seemed to find appealing. Nadia did not know this was happening. She only knew that the week after she met Dottie, the town seemed warmer. Later, when she understood small towns better, she understood why. She brought Dottie a jar of the pickled vegetables she had made from the ranch garden, an old recipe from her grandmother, the kind of thing you bring to someone as a way of saying thank you when you do not have the words yet. Dottie tasted one from the jar, right there at the post office counter, made a sound of extreme approval, and immediately demanded the recipe. It was the beginning of a friendship that would outlast everything else in this story. The letter arrived in Nadia's 3rd month at Dusthaven. It came through the agency, forwarded, which meant it had traveled a long way before it found her. She knew the handwriting before she even looked at the return address. She knew it the way you know a smell that makes you feel sick. Her whole body knew it before her mind finished processing what she was looking at. She took it upstairs and read it alone in her room. She did not come down for dinner that evening. She heard Colt moving around in the kitchen below. She heard the sound of something being set on a tray, heard footsteps coming up the stairs, and then a soft sound, the tray being placed on the floor outside her door, and then the footsteps going back down. He had left her food. He had not knocked. He had not asked if she was all right, which she was not. He had simply ensured that she had dinner, and then left her alone with her space and her quiet, which was exactly what she needed, and which she would not have known how to ask for. She ate the food at midnight, sitting on the floor with her back against the bed and Zora asleep in the crib beside her. The food was still warm enough. She thought about that too. The next morning Colt was at the kitchen table with his coffee when she came downstairs. He looked up. He did not ask about the letter. He did not ask about last night. He said, in a voice that was very even and completely without pressure, "There's a man in town I'd like you to meet if you're willing. He's the county sheriff. Name's Leo Adkins. Good man. Knows a lot of people and a lot about how things work. Legally speaking, if ever there's something that needs working out." He paused. "I'm not pushing, just wanted you to know that's an option if you ever wanted it." He went back to his coffee. She sat down across from him and poured herself a cup and thought about it. He had not asked what was in the letter. He had not asked her what she was afraid of. He had just quietly, without fanfare, put a door in front of her in case she wanted to walk through it. 3 days later, she asked him to introduce her to the sheriff. It was October, 5 months in, when she finally told him some of it. Not all of it, not yet, but some. They were on the back porch in the evening. The sky had gone the color of an ember, that deep orange red that Texas evenings do so well, and the air had finally started to lose some of its summer weight. May had left for college 2 weeks before, which meant the house was quieter, which meant the evenings were longer. Colt was on the porch steps with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. Nadia was in the rocking chair. She had claimed it gradually, without meaning to, the way you claim any chair you sit in often enough. Zora was inside, asleep. The ranch sounds were settling into the particular quiet that came after the day's work was done. She started talking. She was not sure what made her start. Maybe the sky. Maybe the quiet. Maybe the fact that she had been carrying the story so long that it had become physically heavy, and she was simply tired of the weight. She told him about her first husband. She told him what the early years were like and what they became. She told him about the pregnancy, and about deciding to leave, and about how long it had taken and how carefully she had had to plan it. She told him about the village and her family and the particular loneliness of having people who were supposed to love you look the other way because it was easier. She did not tell him everything. Some of it she was not ready to say out loud to anyone, but she told him more than she had told any person since she left. Her hands were shaking by the time she stopped. She noticed them shaking and pressed them flat on her knees. Colt did not speak immediately. He looked at the horizon for a moment, the way he did when he was thinking something through. Then he said, "He will never come here." Just those 5 words. No speech about it. No explanation of how he would prevent it or what he would do. Just a statement of absolute intention, delivered in the same voice he used to say all the other true and practical things he said. She looked at him. She had been waiting, without fully knowing she was waiting, for the moment he would flinch. When he heard the real story she had expected, based on all her prior experience with what happened when men heard the real story, some kind of retreat, discomfort, blame arranged carefully as concern, some version of, "You should have left sooner, you should have tried harder, you should have done something differently." He did none of those things. He just told her that her past would not follow her here, in a voice that suggested this was not so much a promise as a fact he had already decided. She believed him. She was a woman who had learned not to believe things easily, and she still believed him. November brought a complication. One of the seasonal workers, a man who had been hired for the cattle work in the fall and who had apparently decided that a woman living on the ranch was an invitation to say certain things, said something to Nadia in the barn one afternoon while she was there checking on the old cat who lived in the hay. She will not repeat what he said. It was not something physical. It was words, delivered with a particular smile, the kind of words that are designed to make a woman feel small and observed in a way she did not choose. She walked out of the barn, walked to the truck, put Zora in the car seat, and started the engine. She got about a quarter-mile down the drive before the truck pulled up alongside her in a second vehicle. Colt had seen her from the equipment shed. He had seen the particular way she was walking, straight, quick, held tight, and he had not needed to know the reason to know something was wrong. He pulled up beside her, and she stopped. He got out and came to her window. He did not reach for the door. He just stood there and said, quietly, "Did someone hurt you?" "Not the way you mean," she said. He nodded. "Okay. Do you want to drive, or do you want me to drive?" "I want to drive." "Then I'll follow you." He followed her. They drove out to the creek, which was the farthest point on the property, which was private and quiet and smelled like water and old grass. They parked. He got out and sat on the hood of his truck and did not rush her. She talked. Not about the specific words, those she did not need to repeat, but about everything else the words had opened up, about what it was like to be a woman in certain situations, about the particular exhaustion of having to be careful all the time, of calculating every room before you entered it, every person before you trusted them, every word before you said it, about how tired she was of being braced. He listened. He sat on the hood of his truck, and he listened, without interrupting and without offering any solutions, which was the right thing to do, because solutions were not what she needed. She needed to say it out loud to a person who would hear it without flinching. When she was done, they sat in the quiet for a while. The creek made its small, steady noise. Then they drove back. The seasonal worker was not at Dusthaven the following morning. No one mentioned his absence. No one needed to. December. Christmas was coming, and Colt had decided to put up a tree, which May had asked him to do by phone with the same specific stubbornness she applied to everything she cared about. He was not, it turned out, naturally gifted at Christmas decorating. Nadia came downstairs one morning and found him in the living room with a large artificial tree half assembled, tinsel applied in a manner that suggested it had been done quickly and without a plan, and a plastic star on top that was sitting at roughly a 45-degree angle and appeared to be losing the battle with gravity. He was regarding all of this with his hands on his hips and the expression of a man who has made a series of decisions that seemed reasonable individually and have produced a collective result that is difficult to explain. Zora was in her bouncy chair in the corner. She was watching the tree with an expression of what can only be described as profound concern, her arms flapping in the anxious way she flapped them when something in her environment was not right. Nadia looked at the tree. She looked at Colt. She looked at Zora, who was still alarmed. She looked back at the star, which had listed a further few degrees in the past 30 seconds. She laughed. A real laugh, sudden and unguarded, the kind that comes up without asking permission, the kind that has not been rehearsed. She pressed her hand over her mouth immediately, the old reflex, the one that had been trained in by years of being in a house where laughing at the wrong moment was dangerous. But the laugh had already happened. It was already real. Colt turned and looked at her. The expression on his face was something she would think about later, in the quiet of her room when the day was over, an expression she did not have a name for at the time. Later she would recognize it as the look of a man remembering something, not a memory of a specific thing, but a feeling, the feeling of a house that has laughter in it, which is a very different house from one that does not. She recovered herself. She pointed at the star. "Would you like me to fix it?" "It's fine," he said. "It is not fine. It's character. It is going to fall on the tree." He looked at the star. Then he looked at her. The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. With Colt, it was never quite a smile, more like the territory in the direction of a smile, close enough that you knew you were near it. "Probably," he agreed. She fixed the star. Zora's arms settled. That evening, Colt left the Christmas tree lights on when they went to bed, and Nadia stood in the living room doorway for a moment before going upstairs, looking at the lit tree in the quiet house, and she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt at home. She went upstairs before she let herself feel it too fully. It was still early. She was still learning to trust it, but it was there. In January, she wrote a letter to her younger sister Oksana, the only person from her family who had not closed the door on her when she left. She had been meaning to write for months. She had not known what to say. She had not wanted to write until she knew what she was writing about, whether this was real, whether it was going to last, whether she was going to be okay. She had not wanted to give anyone hope, including herself, on something that might not hold. But January came, and she was still here, and Zora was doing well, growing fast, laughing now, trying to sit up on her own with enormous determination and very little success, and she decided she had enough to say. She sat at the kitchen table after dinner, while Colt was on the porch, and Zora was asleep upstairs, and she wrote. She wrote about Texas, the flatness, the sky, the strange and enormous quiet of it. She wrote about the ranch. She wrote about May, who she described as the most energetic person she had ever met, and also somehow, unexpectedly, someone she loved. She wrote about Dottie. She wrote about the way the mornings here were different from any mornings she had known before. She wrote, "The man here is quiet. I know that sounds like a small thing, but you know that quiet can be many different kinds. This kind is not the quiet that is saving up something bad. This is the quiet of a person who does not feel the need to fill all the space with himself. He just lets there be space. For me, for Zora, for the day to be what it is. I did not know people could be like this. I thought maybe it was something in books." She stopped and looked at what she had written. She added, "I think I am beginning to believe that this place is mine. I do not know what that means exactly yet, but the believing has started. That is enough for now." She sealed the letter and put it by the door to be posted in the morning, and she went to bed and slept through the night without waking up once. She noticed that when she woke up, she lay still in the early light, and she noticed no nightmare, no waking in the dark, just sleep, steady and ordinary, the whole way through. She lay there, and let that be a good thing. She found him in February, on a cold gray afternoon, standing at a grave. It was in the far pasture, at the edge of the property where a line of cedar trees grew close together and made a kind of shelter. She had not known it was there. She had taken Zora out for a walk, bundled against the cold, and wandered farther than she usually did, and she came around the edge of the cedar trees, and there he was. He was standing with his hat in his hands, rain starting to come down slowly, looking at a headstone she could not read from where she was. His shoulders were not slumped exactly. He was not collapsed. He was just there, still, the way he went still when something required his full attention. She could have turned around. He had not seen her. She could have given him his privacy. She did not turn around. She walked over and stood beside him. He looked at her, and she could see in his face that he had been here a while, that he had been feeling something that was not easy to feel. He did not look embarrassed, which surprised her. Most men she had known would have been embarrassed to be caught feeling anything. He just looked at her, and then back at the grave, and she stood beside him in the rain, and neither of them spoke. They stood there a long time. The rain got heavier. Zora, sensibly, fell asleep against Nadia's shoulder. When they walked back to the house, his shoulder brushed hers. He did not move away. She did not move away. That evening after dinner, he brought out a box of photographs and set it on the kitchen table. He said, "Her name was Elaine," and then he opened the box. He talked about his wife for a long time. He talked about her the way you talk about someone you loved honestly, including the hard parts, including the arguments, and the years that were not easy, and the things he wished he had done differently. He did not make her into a saint. He made her into a person, which was a much better thing. Nadia listened the way she always listened, completely, without performing sympathy, just actually being present for every word. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She sounds like someone who would want you to be warm." He looked at her. A long moment. "Yeah," he said. "She would." He closed the box. He put it back on the shelf. He made them both more tea, and they sat there in the kitchen until it was late, and the ranch was quiet, and Zora woke up needing to be fed, and Nadia got up and went upstairs and thought about what it meant to love someone enough to still grieve them after 6 years, and to grieve them honestly, without pretending the grief was not there. She thought, this is what love looks like when it is real, not the version that was performed at her, the actual thing. By spring, something had changed between them, though neither of them had named it. They had been living, since she arrived, with a particular consideration for each other, a care born from their agreement, from the strangeness of their situation, from the fact that they were two people who had come together without the usual history that leads people to each other. They had been polite. They had been respectful. They had been, she realized now, extremely careful. But somewhere during the winter, through the nightmare in the hallway and the creek and the Christmas tree and the grave in the rain and all the small daily exchanges that make up a shared life, the carefulness had changed into something else, something more natural, less deliberate. She knew which drawer he needed first in the morning. He knew she took her coffee sweet, which had surprised him the first time he saw it. She did not look like a person who wanted sweetness, he had said, which was the most personal observation he had made about her to that point, and she had thought about that for a long time afterward. She knew that when the ranch news was bad, he set his jaw a certain way and went quiet for a while before talking about it. He knew that when she was frightened, she did not flinch. She went very still, too still, like something trying not to be noticed. He had learned to see that stillness and give her space inside it. She knew he checked on Zora before he went to bed every night, not because she had asked him to. He just did. She had seen him, the door quietly opening, the brief pause, the door closing again, just checking, just making sure. Zora, for her part, had developed what could only be described as a preference for the cowboy. She reached for him the moment he came into a room. She held his face in both hands when he picked her up, grabbing his jaw with her small fingers and examining it very seriously, as if she were verifying that he was consistently himself. He endured this examination with complete patience every time. Nadia watched these small things, and she thought about the word they had both avoided using, the word that was on the paper they had signed, the word that neither of them had claimed for what this actually was. She thought, they were already married, not in the way the paper said. In the real way, in the daily way, in the way of two people who had learned each other's rhythms and filled in each other's gaps without making a thing of it. The legal agreement had happened at the beginning. The real vows were being written in small gestures, every day, without ceremony or announcement. In late spring, on an ordinary Tuesday when Nadia had Zora on her hip and was buying stamps at the post office, a man she had never seen before walked in. She knew, immediately, that he had been sent. She did not know how she knew. The body knows these things before the mind finishes working them out. Something in the way he looked at her, like a person finding what they came for. He was polite. That was the most frightening thing about him. He spoke very politely, in a voice that was careful and quiet, and he said things that were, on the surface, if you wrote them down, perfectly reasonable things. He was a cousin of her first husband's. He had come a long way to speak with her. He hoped she was well. He hoped the baby was well. And he would like very much, he said, still very politely, for her to consider coming home, because there was a situation that needed to be resolved. He smiled when he said this. The smile was the part that was not polite. Dottie was behind the counter. Dottie's eyes were sharp as a hawk's, and she was watching every second of this exchange with an expression that suggested she was calculating rapidly. Nadia said, very calmly, that she was not interested in going anywhere, and that anything that needed to be resolved would need to be resolved through proper legal channels, and that she had a lawyer and a sheriff who would be happy to assist with that process. She said it in the same flat, steady voice she had found over the past year, the voice she had not had 5 years ago, the voice she had been building ever since. The man stopped smiling. He said a few more things, still politely, still quietly, and then he left. Dottie came out from behind the counter before the door had even finished closing and put both arms around Nadia, and Nadia stood in the post office in Dottie's large, emphatic embrace and held it together for exactly 30 seconds before she let herself shake, just briefly, just the shaking that the body needs to let something out before it can settle again. Then she buckled Zora into the car and drove home. She drove carefully. She kept both hands on the wheel. She talked to Zora, who was awake and babbling in the back seat, and she told her, in Ukrainian, because it was the language that came when she was feeling things strongly, that everything was going to be fine. Zora did not understand the words, but she seemed to understand the tone, because she settled. Colt was coming in from the barn when she pulled up. He saw her face before she said anything. He waited. She got Zora out of the car seat and handed her to him, and then she told him everything. Not just what had happened today, everything. All of it, the parts she had held back, the things she had not said yet, the full weight of what she was, and where she had come from, and what was coming. She told him because he deserved to know. Not because of any agreement, not because she owed it to the arrangement, because this man had held her daughter and stood beside her in the rain and backed away in dark hallways so she would not be afraid, and he deserved the whole truth. He listened. He held Zora the whole time, the baby sitting upright on his forearm in her usual spot, watching her mother with serious dark eyes. When Nadia finished, there was a pause. Then Colt shifted Zora to his other arm, walked to the kitchen counter, and picked up the phone. He called Sheriff Leo Adkins. He explained the situation briefly and directly. He listened to the response. He said thank you and hung up. He called a lawyer, a man he had gone to school with who now practiced in Austin, immigration and family law. He explained the situation. He listened. He took notes on a piece of paper in his blunt, careful handwriting. He said he would be in touch and hung up. He put the coffee on. He turned around and looked at her. "This is your home," he said. "Yours and Zora's. Anyone who wants to argue that is going to have to go through me, and then through Leo, and then through the lawyer in Austin, and that's going to take them a very long time and cost them a great deal and get them nowhere." He said it quietly. He said it in the voice he used for things that were already decided. Nadia looked at this man across the kitchen, this large, quiet, practical man who was not going to sweep her off her feet, who was never going to write her a poem, who showed love the way a well-built fence shows love, solidly, without flourish, in a way that actually keeps what needs keeping in and what needs keeping out. She thought, "I have been looking my whole life for safety, and I kept thinking it would feel like something extraordinary, a grand gesture, a declaration, something that would announce itself. I did not know it would feel like this, like a man putting on coffee after making 2 phone calls. Like the simplest thing in the world." The weeks that followed were not dramatic. They were the opposite of dramatic. They were forms and phone calls and appointments with the lawyer in Austin, where Colt sat in a chair in a law office and answered questions and signed things and then drove home and went back to work. They were conversations with the sheriff. Careful, factual, recorded conversations that built the kind of legal record that makes certain problems understand they will cost more than they are worth. Nadia's first husband was not, in the end, a man who would spend his own money to fight a battle in a foreign country that he was not going to win. When the letters from the Austin lawyer arrived, precise and unhurried, and making it entirely clear that the jurisdiction here was not going to cooperate with what he had in mind, the letters from his side stopped coming. The cousin did not come back. The silence that followed was different from previous silences. Previous silences had felt like something waiting to happen. This silence felt like something that was finished. Nadia stood on the back porch one evening and listened to that silence and let herself believe it. The story ends on a Sunday morning in late spring. 11 months have passed since Nadia stood on a train platform with a bruise and a sleeping baby and a letter of arrangement in her bag. 11 months, less than a year, enough to change everything. Colt is at the stove. He is making eggs, something he taught himself during the winter when Nadia was sick for a week and he had to feed the household, and which he has continued doing on Sunday mornings ever since because she said they were good, and he took that as the goal. Zora is on the kitchen floor. She is 14 months old now, and she has discovered the bottom shelf of the pantry, and she is engaged in a systematic project of removing every item from that shelf one by one and arranging them in a line along the baseboard. She has been working on this for 20 minutes. She has the focused energy of someone with a clear vision. The back door is open and the morning air is coming in, warm already, because Texas does not ease into summer, but carrying with it the smell of the pasture and something blooming out toward the ridge. The radio on the counter is playing something quiet. Nadia is at the table with her coffee. Sweet, as always. 2 spoons, which Colt has stopped commenting on, which means he has fully accepted it. She is watching Zora move her cans of beans. She is watching Colt at the stove, the set of his shoulders, the deliberate way he moves, the fact that he is still wearing his outside boots because he has already been out to check on the cattle and come back and started breakfast without changing shoes, which is exactly the kind of detail she has come to know. She is thinking about the train platform. She thinks about it sometimes, the way you think about a place you have traveled a long distance from. She thinks about the heat and the bruise and the weight of Zora in her arms and the terror she was holding so carefully it was almost quiet. She thinks about looking for his face in the crowd and finding it and thinking, this could be another mistake. I could be doing this wrong again. She thinks about what he said, "You're safe with me now." She had not believed it yet, that day. She had needed to watch him. She had needed the weeks and the months, the small pieces, the evidence. She had needed to see him back away in the dark hallway with his hands raised. Needed to see him put food outside a closed door without knocking. Needed to see him sit on the hood of a truck by a creek and listen without offering solutions. Needed to see him at a grave in the rain, grieving honestly, without performing strength he did not feel. She had needed all of that before she could let the words be true. They are true now. She gets up from the table. She crosses the kitchen. She does something she has not done before, not in 11 months, not in all the careful, gradual building of trust that has happened between them. She puts her hand on his back, flat, between the shoulder blades, and she leaves it there. He goes still, not the startled kind of still, the other kind, the kind of still that is paying full attention, the kind that says, I feel that, I know what that means. He does not turn around. He does not make a thing of it. He just breathes. Good morning, she says. Morning, he says. Neither of them moves. The sun comes through the east window at the angle it comes through on spring mornings in central Texas. It lights the kitchen gold. Zora lines up her last bean can with the precision of a person who has achieved something important and then sits back and surveys her work. Outside the ridgeline that Nadia has learned by heart, the pasture she has walked every week, the cedar trees at the far edge where a grave reminds them both that love is real because loss is real, and you love anyway. Inside, eggs on the stove, coffee cooling, a small girl doing her serious work on the kitchen floor, a woman's hand between a man's shoulder blades. A home. She had crossed an ocean and half a continent for it. It was exactly enough.